The conflict in the Middle East spills into the classroom. How to make sure protests remain respectful, not hateful. The Point starts right now. Passions on both sides. The First Amendment rights of teachers and students. Where do you draw the line? Is there a need to draw one? School Chancellor David Banks is here to sort it all out with me. But let's start with the first thing. The Federal Department of Education has opened an investigation into how the City Department of Education is dealing with both anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. How does that make you feel that the feds are now watching what you're doing?
Well, it's interesting. Number one, I think folks should understand that we get inquiries from the feds on a regular basis. And what they're doing here in this specific case, the complaint that was made was not about Islamophobia. It was purely about an act of anti-Semitism and one particular act at a particular school. So they're not launching an investigation into our entire system. They're just following up on a complaint that someone made that perhaps there was an act of anti-Semitism. So we welcome them in joining us, really, because we have been investigating these issues now for quite some time, and we're going to get to the bottom of all of it, and we welcome their partnership on it.
But it is a really difficult thing to deal with because, as I said, there are strong feelings on both sides. And the question is, how do you bridge the gap between everybody and making both sides understand that they should be, each side's views should be respected as long as it doesn't break the law?
You do it by communication, Marcia, and by engaging people, which has been a real strong point of our administration and how I move personally as a leader for this school system. You know, what happened on October 7th was absolutely horrific. And I said it, and the mayor has said it very, very clearly. But what we've also seen happening throughout the system in too many cases are acts of anti-Semitism as well as Islamophobia, even in our schools. And so we are watching all this very closely. We're monitoring it. We're investigating. And we have to take action. We are taking action. And I think many people saw recently Hillcrest High School, which is near and dear to me, Marcia. I graduated.
Yes, you graduated
from Hillcrest High School.
And all your brothers.
And all my brothers. I was the vice president of the senior class. To this day, it's the greatest accomplishment that I've ever had. And
no, that's actually not true.
It meant a lot to me, I will tell you that. And I've been back to Hillcrest several times, and it's been wonderful. And I was so deeply disturbed to see, how could you have a group of students who would target one teacher for her Jewish faith? She held up a sign on her Facebook profile that said, "I stand with Israel." Right. That's certainly within her rights, just like a teacher who would hold up a sign and say, "I stand with the Palestinians." That's fine. She didn't cast any aspersions against anyone else. And so we had to look into that. We had to take disciplinary actions against several of the students who were responsible for that. What you saw in the images of all the kids, most of those kids had no idea what was even going on.
Well, we should point out that there were 400 kids who were involved, but the school has 2,500 students, so it wasn't like the whole school was involved.
Right, but 400 is 400 too many, but most of those 400 kids also didn't even know what was going on. The bell had rung, and everybody was in between classes, so there were lots of kids in the hallway anyway, and many of them just started jumping around and making noise. They didn't even know what was going on.
So I wonder if you had an opportunity to speak with several of the ringleaders of this demonstration, the organizers of the demonstration, and what you said to them about their actions and whether it was acceptable, a school protest, or an unacceptable school protest.
Well, you know, Marcia, it's interesting. I went to the school several days ago together with Queensborough President Donovan Richards, the chair of the Education Committee, Rita Joseph, and other leaders. And I engaged in conversation with about 70 different students at the school, some of whom were there and involved. And I heard a wide range of things from those kids. The kids who were actually suspended, who were really kind of the ringleaders, I've not spoken to them yet, but I will be speaking to them directly in the coming days. They're been suspended for a pretty significant period of time, but we're going to use this as a teachable moment. But I will tell you, the most compelling thing that I heard from the kids, many of the kids told the younger kids, what you did was completely wrong. unacceptable, and that's not the way that you handle protests. It was really good to see that, because most of the kids who were involved were 9th graders. So the 11th and 12th graders in the school admonished them to say it was wrong. But one other thing I heard was a student who said, we are seeing so many things that we're being influenced by social media, and we don't know what's right or what's wrong. And then when we come to school, we're not having these conversations in school.
You know, I was at the press conference that you held at the school, and what you talked about was was an interesting topic to me. You talked about the fact that the kids in school don't get their news from normal circumstances. They get it from social media. So they're not reading newspapers, they're not watching television news. And so it's possible that their images are skewed. And my question to you is, now knowing that, because you talked to them about it, how does a school system try to get them the truth or a balanced view of what's going on?
That's what we're trying to do right now. And it's really challenging, because many of the adults in our schools also shy away from these kind of politically fraught topics, because no one wants to be accused of being anti-anything. And yet we have a responsibility to our kids to make sure that we do this. So we're looking to engage a number of other organizations that are even coming from outside of our schools, who have a wide range of curricular options, but more importantly, help us to have courageous conversations with our students. I'll be making an announcement in the coming days around those groups that we're going to be working with to help us in this moment.
But I guess, how do you make teachers who are afraid that they're going to do something that could cost them their job, how do you make them feel that it's okay to tackle what is really a difficult situation? And one of the things that I was struck with at your press conference is that you said, we are not going to be able to solve the conflict in the Middle East. Well, you know, you're not in the school system, but what you have to do is solve the conflict in the schools.
Well, absolutely. And again, that comes back to communication and who you engage. I've met with Jewish leaders all across the city, and I continue to do that. I've met with Muslim leaders across the city, and I will continue to do that. And we're going to bring folks together as well to help us chart a path forward. I've heard a wide range of different ideas around things that we could do, one of which would be a hotline that any teacher or any student who feels unsafe, physically or emotionally unsafe, particularly based on their race or their religion or gender, that they will have a place that they can call, and we will be able to respond to that. I'm working to put all of those pieces together now.
But, you know, one of the things that also struck out for me was the fact that there are 30% of that school are of the Muslim faith.
Yes.
And so there's a large proportion of students who feel, 1/3, who feel some sympathy to what's going on in Gaza and to the number of Palestinians who are losing their lives because of the conflict. And so they're seeing that side of it. So I guess the question is, you know, how do you make them understand that you respect their feelings and their views, but explain to them that there are acceptable ways to protest and ways that are not acceptable?
And that's where some of these groups that we're seeking to engage are going to be able to help us. Groups like Morningside, who we're working with at Hillcrest High School right now. Groups like Facing History and ourselves, who are well-versed in these kinds of approaches. And we need to engage our adults in these spaces, because the adults, in far too many cases, have been afraid to engage. But these groups who have real expertise are the folks we're going to help to rely on to help get us there.
But what you're saying, though, is that students do have a right to protest.
Absolutely. Students have a right to protest. We had a number of students the other day who marched out of their high school, Fort Hamilton High School in Bay Ridge section of Brooklyn, because there was a teacher at another school who had posted all kinds of vile Islamophobic statements on their social media. And we had already taken action, but the kids wanted to come out and have their voices heard on that.
But they came out of the school.
But they came out of the school.
They didn't do it in the hallways.
They didn't do it in the hallways. They did it responsibly. They made their voices heard. And many of them went back to school after it was over. But a small group of those students also went to the teacher's home, which is completely unacceptable. And so you had some kids who were doing it the right way, and then you have some kids who are engaging in unacceptable behavior. I've got to deal with all of it and help them all to understand how you engage civically is critically important. And we have to teach them how to do that.
So much more to talk about, and we'll be right back to do that. Thanks a lot. We're back with Schools Chancellor David Banks, who is wrestling with a really difficult problem, the aftermath of the shocks that are being felt in the school system by what's going on in the Middle East. I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the acceptable form of protest for students and for teachers who also have strong views about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, first of all, we want students and teachers to express their voice, but we've got to do it in responsible ways. And we want our kids to be informed even as they are protesting. They've got to continue to learn about what these issues are. They've got to read about it. I'll give you an example. One of the things we've been doing with a lot of our students, Marcia, across the city, I've been working with the Jewish Children's Museum in Brooklyn now for a couple of years. We've sent hundreds of students from all across the city to go and to visit that museum and learn more about the Jewish people. And we're going to be doing that together with Muslim partners going forward as well. When kids are informed, it makes for a better sense of protests, because when you're protesting about things that you just don't even understand, that's uninformed, and that's not a good way for us to show up. And you got to ask the right questions, and we want you to meet with the right folks. I've had folks who've protested me since I've been chancellor, and I've said, before you protest on the steps of Tweed, ask for a meeting. We can talk. Communication is the key element here. Communication and education, being informed. I
wonder if demanding that a teacher be fired is an acceptable form of protest.
Listen, I certainly not being demanding that they be fired based upon their religious belief. That is unacceptable, and we say that unequivocally. But if there's egregious behavior that has been demonstrated by anyone, certainly you can express that, but you don't do that with any level of expression of violence or targeting of anyone in particular. You have to bring that to the appropriate channels. And in this case, that should have been brought to the attention of the principal. It could have been brought to the attention even of the chancellor. But to target a teacher, wholly unacceptable. We will not tolerate that.
So the other side of that is, did you think that that teacher had the right to use a Facebook picture that said, "I stand with Israel" as her picture, and not think that it could exacerbate tensions?
I think that the teacher was certainly within her rights to do that, just like I think any teacher who posted on their own personal Facebook page that I stand for the freedom of the Palestinian people. These are all political issues, but I think they certainly fit within the purview of a person's individual rights. And I don't think there was anything wrong with doing that. But I think if students felt that way, that's an opportunity for a teachable moment, for conversation to be had, but certainly not to expect that you're going to come to work and you're going to have people protesting and rioting in the school. That is unacceptable.
But see, when you met with the students, you were moved by the passions expressed by some of the students who are of Muslim faith.
That's right, I was. And
explain to us why.
Because what the students said to us was they don't watch the traditional mainstream media, you know, that I watch and many adults watch. They get a lot of their information on social media and TikTok, and in this particular case. And for them, they've been seeing images of Palestinian families being killed. They've seen images of their communities, Muslim and Arab communities, being denied food and water. That resonates deeply with them. They said those are our families that are over there. And I think they took the teacher's posting to mean you support that happening to our people. They did not handle it the right way, but certainly they have their own emotions. That's why we have to educate and we have to bring people together so we understand each other.
But so one of the ironies of all of that was that after that press conference, a number of Jewish teachers had a protest. The steps of Tweed are a really favorite place for everybody to protest. And they were not happy with what had happened, and they felt that they weren't getting the support that they need from the system. Is that wrong and misplaced? Is that just fears because there has been nationally a rise in anti-Semitic incidents and people are afraid?
And I think that's what it is, Marcia. You know, this is, as I said, it's an emotionally fraught issue. It's happening in the Middle East, but we're also seeing Jewish teachers, we're seeing Muslim teachers, Jewish students, Muslim students also across the city feeling a sense of not being safe. And people are responding to that. This is not your run-of-the-mill issue or topic. This is one that is fraught with deep with history and emotion and experiences that people have had. And I understand that, and I empathize with that. And I don't fault anyone for having strong emotional feelings about it. But as the leader of the entire school system, I have a responsibility to hear from everyone and try to make the best decisions moving forward. And I'm certainly going to do that, but I'm going to do that working together with responsible partners on all sides.
So do you think that there's a difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism? Because that may be the crux of what's going on here, that the students who are pro-Palestinian are upset about the Zionistic goals of Israel as opposed to the religious goals of Israel.
And I think that is the case in a lot of cases. I think where students have said, I'm not against the Jewish people at all. And I think what happened on October 7th was horrific. But I also want to make sure that the Palestinian people are respected and supported as well. And so I think there are people who do make the distinction. There's some folks who don't make the distinction at all. And it's all mixed together. And I've got to figure out ways to sort it out, at least as relates to the folks who are working in our schools.
So you said you were going to have a Zoom meeting with principals and superintendents. Did you have it, and what happened?
I did. I had the first meeting with all the superintendents who represent all the schools across the entire city. Very powerful. Many of them shared with us the various groups that they have been working with in their own districts over the years that have been very, very helpful with schools having courageous conversations. And in fact, I identified about 5 of those superintendents to have them speak to all the principals the following day when we had the Zoom with all the principals across the city. And 5 of those superintendents actually spoke to share some of the resources and the relationships that they have with different organizations to help as well.
Did the principals talk about how difficult they feel it is to deal with what is essentially an intellectual minefield?
Well, it was interesting. You know, it was a Zoom that was very challenging for all the principals to speak. You know, we got 1,600 principals, and it'd be a bit much to get them all talking on a Zoom. But we are now having those conversations in the various superintendencies. And as I've traveled around the city already, I've been to a number of schools, and that is what principals have said to me, that some of them are doing a really good job with this, and we're going to lift them up. And there are others who are saying we need help, because I don't want to engage in these conversations and then have someone accuse me or any of my teachers of being anti-Semitic because I might have said something the wrong way, or being Islamophobic because I may have said something the wrong way. So people are treading very lightly here, but they've got to know that you can't put your head in the sand. We've got to help to have those conversations for everyone. Are
they afraid that they're going to say the wrong thing?
Yes, they are. And that's a big part of the reason why schools generally don't engage in many of these conversations. And I think we've got to help kids. Listen, first and foremost, our job is to educate kids. They've got to do the basics of what school is supposed to be about. That's what our jobs really are. That's why I'm looking to engage some of these other outside partners who can come in and help us to have these kinds of conversations.
I just wonder if you think that the school system should develop a program or a course that kids should take about tolerance.
I just met with elected officials from all across the city, and Speaker of the City Council, Adrian Adams, was the first one to say, we need to create a curriculum. We need to dust off some of the old stuff we've been doing. We've got to meet the moment of what's happening today. But in order for me to do that, I've got to engage with the right partners across the board to help us develop what we should be doing.
Well, we're going to have to leave it right there for now, but our conversation continues right after the show on our streaming channel, CBS News New York.